Welcome back to all the State of Affairs podcast viewers and the audience that I have got over the time. Today, I have got with me somebody who I have been looking forward to have an interaction and a conversation on a very special topic about gender studies. Before that, I would like to introduce her first. Her name is Unnati Jain. She is a research scholar in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at Malviya National Institute of Technology, Jaipur. She has also been an assistant professor of English back, I guess, a couple of years back, and then she's now into research. The entire edifice of our conversation will be that what gender studies constitutes all about, and then her special and specific area of interest. We'll be also talking about that. I warmly welcome Unnati on this podcast and a conversation.
Thank you so much.
Before consuming lots of time, I'll just leave you with the stage and draw us a landscape of the entire gender studies thing that you are coming up with. Because I have already conducted, I guess, 4 or 5 podcasts on this. So the stage is all yours. You can just begin.
Okay, thank you so much for this very humbling introduction. Thank you. And I hope it's a very broad thing that I have, to talk upon today. So I will not take. I'll just. So, gender studies, very broad term. It basically refers to the academic study of the phenomenon of gender. And then the question comes, what is meant by gender? So within feminist thought and within the feminist theory, there's a distinction that has been made between sex and gender, where sex refers to the fact of being either male or female, and the cultural and the social of masculinity and femininity that are then assigned to different people. So gender refers to those traits and characteristics that a person is expected to possess, by virtue of being a male or a female, as well as the different roles that the person is expected to perform because he's living in the society. So you might say that women may be seen as naturally caring, while men may be seen as naturally rational. It may lead to the belief that women are naturally suited to jobs like nursing, while men will make for good scientists and engineers. The study looks at the norm, patterns of behavior associated with masculinity and femininity come into being. So now that it talks about the entire construction of masculinity, it also then studies the features of these norms and the patterns, like which traits are considered to be masculine, which are feminine, and why. It goes to the why of these. And then stereotypical models of men and women have developed over time. And now that they're developed, how will they change over time, or how are they changing over time? And what are the factors, that contribute to these changes? And also, very importantly, what impacts do such stereotypes have upon actually existing men and women in the real? Now, the gender studies focus upon actually existing men and women. And, it is significant because within gender studies, there is a recognition that men and women, they don't exist in isolation from their social roles and positions. So, for example, if I paint a picture here very metaphorically that, someone is on the z-axis and the coordinates are all, and these coordinates are then in the social realm of existence. A woman is not only a woman within our society, she also has a certain class position, caste position, religious identity, sexual identity, and many more. And likewise, so now that my research area is on, women, fictional women and cross. So I read a lot upon dressing and fashion and clothing because my research is that my thesis is on this topic more or less. So when I think of, the difference in girls and boys clothing, I realize that skirts, saris, salwar kurtas, they're all as feminine clothing, whereas trousers, shirts, etc. masculine clothing. There are differences. For example, feminine clothing is, often more colorful, more embellished, more sparkly, more shining. Whereas, in men's clothing, they're more subtle and, they're more bold, more professional looking in that way. Also common items in clothing, like, there are neckties, there are suits that women now wear. So that gives us a clear idea that clothing is also gendered. It differs for both the genders, and in doing so, it allows determining whether the wearer is a male or a female. Just by looking at the person, you now know that what their gender is. Or sometimes men and women do wear clothing that is absolutely identical. For example, a school uniform may consist of a tie that both girls to wear. In this case, this tie is also a gendered article of clothing. Studies perspective, it will be seen that clothing that is common to both men and women is often men's clothing that women have. Like neckties, earlier as well. It may be noticed that folks go off to the office wearing business suits, trousers, and jackets. Now, these are masculine clothes that have the time adopted by women. So, it is, you find so many examples of clothing which are, stereotypically of the men's domain and culturally adapted by women in order to go, be a part of the work, represent the workforce in that manner. So now, thus the various aspects of the living world are gendered. They different genders, the experiences of them, they differ in ways, depending upon which gender they are. So the study of the gendered nature of the social and the physical world is also now an important part of gender studies. Studies can be applied then, for example, academic disciplines, psychology, to political science, biology, law, economics, whatever disciplines of study that there are. So gender studies basically encompasses many disciplines. It's an umbrella term under which all disciplines would come. It is multidisciplinary in its approach. And this is the important dimension of gender studies because, now that it is multidisciplinary, it has the ability to, point out the gaps that are there, the crevices that are there within certain disciplines. But then these crevices can be, addressed by bringing the disciplines together. By, for example, if you merge, let's say, economics and sociology, and then talk about gender. For example, you're talking about SES, the social, and you also have some, sociological perspectives to it. Idea about gender studies. Now, the origin of gender studies lies basically in women's studies came into being in order to address the gaps in the economic knowledge that resulted, let's say, from adequate representation of women and their incorporation. So many women's studies point often academic disciplines would take women into account when developing theories and concepts.
Just a moment. Yes. I guess your voice is actually dropping in between. And
is it proper now?
It's clear, but it's dropping. I guess you are speaking and it's your headphones are not in sync with your speaking. So if you can speak a bit slower so that
slowly, definitely I'll do that.
I guess
I'm sorry for speaking 2x in general. I speak a little faster.
It's quite normal, but I guess your headphones are not in sync with your speaking. That's why. I mean, with your voice.
Okay. In case this reoccurs, please point it out. So I'll just maybe take out the AirPods and speak again in case.
Okay, fine.
Okay. Yeah. So where was I?
Origin of the gender studies.
I was talking. Yes. So many women studies scholars, they have pointed out that the academic disciplines, they don't take women into consideration when they're talking or concepts. So one example that we can take is that women's unpaid housework is not calculated as a part of our country's GDP. For example, GDP is reflect the total of the goods and the services. It doesn't take housework into consideration. It's more womanly domain, so to say. So gender studies perspective can, in this way, indicate and correct the imbalances and the inaccuracies in various disciplines that the very essential gendered fabric of those disciplines. So it can also ask that significant question that why have these errors and these imbalances, why have these errors and these imbalances come into being? Why have various disciplines not recognized the contributions of women till date? So, in totality of what I've spoken till now, gender studies in this way has questioned and is questioning the theories, the underlying assumptions of many disciplines, and in doing so, has developed new tools and techniques for research, and also has a lot of room for multidisciplinarity.
I have an observation on Unnati to make. I mean, before
Yes.
I can just proceed with that, I guess you have to set your headphones correct in order to make
Okay.
it. I guess if you can disconnect them and you can speak without them, I guess that will make your voice not drop.
Am I audible now? Like
Yeah,
properly?
perfect.
Works? Great. Okay, I'll
And,
just take
and one observation I'd like to make. I mean, the entire origin and entire gender studies, you have defined it in a very beautiful manner. But my point is that, see, on the one hand, you have certain countries actually coming up with feminist foreign policy. I mean, I was talking to you before this podcast, and there is a gap. I mean, in the entire developed world, you can see the narrative, the discourse on gender, I mean, gender equality and gender itself is at a different level. I mean, on the other hand, in countries like in the subcontinent, we can say we still are fighting at social level with the mindset. I mean, you have to actually empower the gender, the women actually. When we talk about gender, not specifically women, but let's put an example here. You have to empower them to a level. I mean, still we are working that government is coming up with with the schemes and with the arrangements and with the laws in order to safeguard. I mean, in order to secure gender equality that mandated by the constitution. But I guess that narrative and discourse building, that's important. Conceptual clarity is still missing. I mean, the people I have come across and the society that I am part of, that conceptual clarity on certain things. That's why, I mean, they have come up with, intersectionalism. I guess that works very well when it's just brought into a discussion and the people actually come to listen and learn about it. So if on the one hand, there is the entire gender discourse is at a different level, and on the other hand, you have people who are still suffering, who don't know about what gender studies constitute. So why do you see that this incoherent, this mismatch between two poles, that we say a society in subcontinent and a society in the European peninsula? I mean, you can say it's totally different. So would you believe that through the piecemeal engineering we can just work it out, we can reach to a level and it's a gradual process? Or you will just say that, okay, you have not to jump because we are any which ways running out of the time if things are not falling in line?
That's a very interesting observation to make. Thank you for putting it out. But before I begin with any answer, I just like to tell you that I have very less and very limited knowledge of politics that way. But I just want to point out one thing, that in the European subcontinent, and we are still developing countries, firstly, and also that most of the theories and if I talk about, like, I am someone who's more into the academic realm, so I sadly know very less about how the real world things are happening. But what I have noticed on my end is that most of the theories, most of the corpus has come from the West. So for example, Black feminism came out when white feminism didn't address Black women and their issues. So there have been, now again, this is a part of gender study, that there was a crevice, there was an unaddressed point that was looked upon by some scholars, and this will keep happening in order to fully develop a model where countries like our countries, like India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, our countries also kind of fall into that, that the policies are made in such a way and the agendas are such that we actually don't have to empower our women deliberately, and that is organically happening. But again, that will take a lot of time. I don't know if I completely answer your question, but then as developing countries, there are so many issues, and that shouldn't be an excuse for not addressing the gender discrimination, the gender gap. But even when we're addressing them, there are so many issues that are already, on the forefront, that this takes a backseat. And even if, and the diversity of especially a country like India. So one policy will not cater to all, the urban, the rural, the different kind of cultures that are there. So I think that many different kind of scholarships will have to come up in order to, and it will take some, I think, more like 5-6 more decades for us to be there, where we don't have to deliberately, bring out schemes like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, but that will organically happen with more education and with more, and also with one more major thing, when, this wide gap between theory and, reality, the world and the word will bridge. When the academia becomes a part of the real world, and, when these papers and all these things, they come into the real world and all merges together, I think we'll be in a better place then. So I hope
I'll just sum it up with this thing. I mean, the answer that you have given is that you will believe in the organic evolution of things, and then you will still bet into the education so that it leads to an empowerment, although gradually. But I mean, if we have not been able to make it through to 100% perfection or success, we still have been able to move the needle. I mean, we are not at zeros. So there has been, I mean, about gender studies, there are certain things. See, when I say conceptual clarity, I just say that it's the academic handicap that we aren't still yet. See, gender studies should have been made part and parcel of the entire curriculum that our schools are, at the college level, at the higher secondary level, or at the school level, we can say. There should have been things that, I mean, it's not only that you talk about the procedural equality, you talk about the procedural things. I mean, you have to just take the discourse to the family level, so that from the very, basics, from the very bottom of it, you create a kind of a discourse so that it becomes easy for people to choose gender studies as an option. So why do you think that this thing is going in our country? I mean, in our curriculum, in our education departments?
Okay, I'll begin with a very small example. A thing that I noticed very late in life. So in our childhood, in our school assignments, we used to get this a picture of my family. And there were charts available on stationery shops for like 1 rupee or 2 rupees, and they had a very colorful picture and a very colorful, what do I say, illustration of a perfect family. And that perfect family had a man and a woman and 2 kids, a boy and a girl, probably very good looking, very well kept man and woman, and 2 kids. Now again, the idea of then having a lesbian, parent couple. What if we saw at an early age that 2 men living together as a gay couple also have kids? Might be those kids are adopted. What if we had an idea of a family which was not, only made of, heteros together? So those, sorry, I just muted myself accidentally. Am I audible? Yes. So then, these kind of things. Sorry, I just, pointing a very small thing that I noticed very late in life. A niece of mine had that chart in her hand, and I looked at the picture of the family. So these are very fundamental, and yet, they're woven in the fabric of our, the social fabric is such, and it will need so much work and massive work, and from the scratch. And so many disciplines will have to come together in order to address this, or even change it even a bit. I mean, I don't know if I make sense or if I just completely answer the question, but why I'm talking about, right, why I just gave this example of this my family thing that our NCERT textbooks have and things like that, though things are changing now, but we've always seen the idea of a hetero family, a man and a woman living together as husband and a wife, and, bringing up children. So now definitely that is the idea that has been, inculcated in us. So a gay couple would definitely, we look at it in a very bizarre manner, in a very unnatural manner. So that is, something that has to be taken up from the very scratch, and not only the curriculum will take care of it. Just, the day-to-day activities, how we are, how, the way, let's say, how we abuse. What are the words of abuse? Where is abuse directed to? Abuse is also so gendered. So things like that, it has to be taken. There's so many dimensions and so many nuances that have to be considered, that have to be taken into consideration in order to, change this entire social fabric and live in a more gender neutral and a gender equal world, for that matter.
I mean, that's actually what I meant about this handicap when I was saying, and you properly dealt with it. I mean, it's not that we have to create a discourse. See, the cows are back home and everything is like hunky dory. It's not like that. You have to create a space, and you have to create a niche in order to let gender studies become so mainstream as other departments of the knowledge, as other departments of the humanities. Say, for example, it's an interdisciplinary approach. We can say that, I mean, I'm amazed by the work of the scholars and the researchers, and also you have been dealing, you are one of the important researcher into this department. I would like you to actually delve on this debate, I mean, key debate about evolution of this gender studies again, so that for the audience, I mean, briefly, you can just put your words into it.
Yes. Shall I maybe then speak a little on what I have to, and maybe just, then carefully.
Yeah, perfect. Take your time.
Works?
Perfect. Am I audible?
Yes, you are perfectly audible.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I hope I am better now.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. So gender studies are definitely it has evolved. But that one thing that has, which is a very important underpinning in gender studies is that, it is political. It raises questions about power in the society and how and why power is differently distributed between different genders. So it asks questions about who has the power over whom, in which situations, how power is exercised, how it is and how it can be challenged. So different theories and perspectives, within gender studies, have different approaches to these questions. And many debates are going on. And, even every day some new data is developing, which is challenging those already existing theories. Foucault is being challenged, Butler is being challenged. All the theorists, which have made it big in gender studies are still being challenged. So that is definitely happening. But before I go ahead, I just want to talk about something very personal, that very late in life did I understand the difference between sex and gender. So now, it is very hard to understand what is meant by sex and gender for some people, because again, it's not the part of the, main curriculum. So gender is a term widely used to refer, the ways in which, the culture reformulates what begins, as a fact of nature. If I, make sense. And, the biological sexes are redefined, represented, valued, and channeled into different various culturally dependent ways. And that is how also it is, each passing day, it is evolving. So, people do not merely internalize gender roles as they grow up, but they also respond to the norms prevalent in any society. For example, children learn to categorize themselves by gender from infancy. So, part of this is learning how to display and perform gendered identities as masculine or feminine. Like children would observe and gradually internalize gendered behavior and, around them through different mediums and sources, through media, let's say, through television, through books, through everything that they see around, through day-to-day practices. And gender differentiated, children's activity gradually, like, boys' favorite color could be blue and girls has to be pink. So that, they gradually cement the gender difference in their behavior. And that later reflects in their nature when they grow up fully as, an adult male or an adult female. So, like that's how we realize that gender is a very complex phenomena, which is socially and culturally, constructed. So an individual would, acquire gender through a process of socialization, and acquires a gendered body that is feminine or masculine. And in the course of social development, they are shaped into feminine or masculine. And I think that is what I have to.
That's very beautifully summed up. I mean, this is all about, I mean, the basic conceptual clarity that you actually provided us with. Also, I mean, there are lots of things that we can talk about on this conversation, but I mean, we are running out of the time. We still have 5-8 minutes left. I would love you to actually shed some light on this. I mean, the entire state of gender studies in the modern India. I mean, where do you see the entire thing going from now, or where it has actually streamed itself out of? So, can you just shed some light on that? Where is the debate going? I mean, in the modern India, how would you tackle it?
Definitely. I think that gender studies as a discipline has evolved a lot. During last 2 decades, we have seen massive, growth in the number of scholars who are actually pursuing gender studies, contributing to the already existing body as well. Now, I think it has expanded a lot in all the disciplines. For example, we are now talking about, how and what is the contribution of women in agriculture, let's say. Two, we are now also talking about, how fashion is degendering, and how, there are more representations of, LGBTQIA plus. So there are, it's actually, I think it is ever evolving, because gender is becoming more and more a gray area, as it used to be the spectrum. So from the polarities, it is no longer a polarized, definition. It is the spectrum. And I also think with this upcoming, with these, social media platforms as well, and more people getting representation, I think it is becoming more of a common thing. And government is also addressing, very recently some gay marriage is legalized. I think the High Court just gave out some, I don't know exactly what was the this new judgment, but I do remember that gay marriage was legalized, and that live-in is legalized and things like that. So I think it is evolving, and in modern India the issues are different, but the essential thing remains the same, that we have to differentiate between gender and sex, and kind of disassociate gender with biological faculty, if I make sense. That we have to differentiate it from the biology, and that very popular debate of nurture and nature versus nurture, that has again to be taken into consideration, and how it is evolving and how it will keep evolving. The definitions would change, the roles would change, and the more we shatter these stereotypes, the more this will expand. And this has kind of made its way to all the disciplines. You will see medical sciences talking about it, which always have talked about it, to now economists talking about it, to sociologists talking about it. So there's, so much happening, and it came a little late, but I'm glad that in today's time we are able to address all of this, and we are having this conversation right now. It makes sense that why it is of such impetus, and it will be having importance over the coming years, I guess, and it should.
That having been said, I'll say that there is yet a large ground. We still have not actually crossed the threshold when it comes to gender studies, gender equality, and gender discourse itself.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be mainstreamed. We just missed the part of it, that we were not able to actually talk about gender mainstreaming at depth,
Mm-hmm.
at length. But given the limitation of time we have, still, I'll say that we still have, when we talk about gender equality, we have some good women who are actually so empowered and so well placed in politics, in administration, at some other places, in a social setup or in administrative setup. They have been making serious improvements, and have become a source of inspiration for many people actually to talk about it. You have a finance minister, and she is a woman, and you have also different ministries going to women also, and then creating a discourse for other genders also. So that having been said, I'll just with the last thing, I just invite you actually and request you to talk about the book list, if you have any with you, so that the audience and the people who love to talk about, who'd love to read about it. Are there some books that you have got with you, and you have actually researched, you have taken your sources from? So
there are a lot of books. I do have a bibliography. If I can share it with you, and you can put it, in some in the caption here somewhere, would that be okay?
You can just read out the names, because I'm not that much
okay.
Technically sound.
Yeah, give me okay, definitely give me a minute. Give me a minute. I'll just open my PDF.
Yeah, take your time. We have still 3-4 minutes.
Yes. Yes, so
mention some important books, so that the person who is approaching gender studies will take note of them.
Definitely. I think anyone should read on the 3 waves of feminism first. There is this book by John Scott, Gender, Useful Category for Historical Analysis. So that can be read as well. We have Judith Butler, Imitation, Gender, Insubordination. So that is definitely to be read. We have Michel Foucault, who has talked, on depth about gender. So that can also be talked about. Then there is this woman, Natalie Davis, who has talked about women on the margins. That can also be talked about. I mean, can be read. We have
come again with this. What's the name?
Yes, it is Women on the Margins. Natalie Davis.
And the Margins. Okay.
Men on the Margins. Yes. Then we have a very famous and very well known in the English Academia, that is Simone de Beauvoir, The Second Sex.
Okay.
So that can again be read, and these are just many of some that I referred for this. And I just want to conclude on one note that during the session I just wanted to address masculinity as well, but somehow I just missed that part.
Yeah, you have again to come up with for another podcast for that. I mean, still we have some important grounds to cover. I guess
definitely a lot has been left.
We'll be left with some important concepts. We'll be taking them in the next podcast. I guess it will be a sequel of this. In this part 1, we had the introduction. We had some basic things also. We talked about other important things, the books. I mean, that they are important as well. In the next podcast, I leave you with an invitation, I guess. Maybe whenever it's convenient. I know that you have a very awfully busy schedule. So I have to actually breach that, and we have to just be on a conversation like this. I would seriously welcome you then again, and I'll be waiting eagerly for another conversation as a sequel of this.
Definitely, we look forward.
And thank you for coming over. I guess it's time to wrap it up. I'll be looking forward for another conversation about this. We'll be continuing with this thing. And have a splendid time out, and thank you again for coming to this.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you so much for having me over. I look forward to I look forward to another upcoming podcast with you, Maharaj.
Sure.
Okay, thank you for having me over.
See you at the other side.
Okay, see you. Bye-bye.